Hey guys, when you're out there in your scroll saw shop and you've got a project that has dozens of entry holes, do you want to be comfortable? Stay tuned. If you own a DeWalt or an Excalibur scroll saw, you're probably more than familiar with what these are. These are the thumb screws that allow you to tighten and release the blade from your scroll saw. And if you've used these for very long, you know that they get very uncomfortable after you've used them for a while. So we've come up with all kinds of different ideas to make these more comfortable, and I'll show you some of those here in a minute. But what I want to talk about is how we're going to change this for both types of saws with one tool that we're going to make ourselves. Here is one of the first tools that I designed to make uncamming these easier. And as you can see, you basically just take your thumb screw, stick it in here, and you have a lever. Now these worked okay on the DeWalt style of thumb screw, which has the curves on each side, but they didn't work on the Excalibur unless you changed the hole. This particular design I came up with was okay, but you had to get this thing in the right position every time. If it was down, it was in your way. If it was up, it was in your way. So there was really no good way to make this work as a permanent solution. So I'll show you the next one. My next effort was this little locking lever that I went to grizzly.com and purchased, and I just had to make sure I got the the right threads and size for the bolt here. And this is one of those releasing levers where you push a button and you can move it. So in this case, you could get it locked down, then you could push this button and move this back up to a horizontal position out of your way. So this was a little better, but still it wasn't a perfect solution because this still would sometimes get in your way. And even more of a problem was on the DeWalt and the Excalibur thumb screws that come with the machines. They actually have a bearing here in the tip of the thumb screw that turns. So when you're locking this thumb screw down onto the blade, once it starts to get tight, this little bearing right here turns, and that's what prevents the blade from getting bent by the torque that you place on it with the thumb screw. So although this was handy and it stayed out of the way a little better, it did not have that bearing in the tip, so this was damaging the blades. Now, most of the time you could get away with that, and I did use this for a while, but you would make a lot of what I call hockey sticks, where you actually bend the end of the blade over. My next solution was to design my own knobs, and in this case I designed a knob. I purchased a screw that was the right size and I just epoxied it in. So it was much more comfortable, but I had the same problem without having the bearing in the tip. So I got rid of that one pretty quick. Then I went back to a solution where I used something similar to the first lever, where I cut out the shape into this round knob that I cut out of Baltic burst plywood, and I would just press the thumb screw into this wood where I cut the hole, and that way I'd still have the bearing and I still had a knob that was more comfortable. So that was my next attempt. Then I moved on from there. I purchased a knob from Seiko.com, and this knob is built to fit into the DeWalt or the Excalibur, and it does have the thumb screw, and it has a black plastic, or originally was a black plastic knob here, and when I went to use it, it was very uncomfortable. It wasn't any better than just the straight thumb screw because these edges were sharp. So I tried to coat this in that tool handle coating that you can get that's like a plastic rubber whatever, and that worked kind of okay, but still, because it was small, it wasn't as comfortable as I wanted it to be. Then a gentleman at a woodworking club down in Atlanta came up with what he calls his comfort knobs, and these are by far the best of anything that I had tried so far. These would work with the DeWalt style thumb screws, in other words the one that's kind of shaped like an S. So it has a little set screw here. You loosen the set screw, you place your DeWalt thumb screw in there, and then you tighten the set screw up and you're ready to go. And these are definitely comfortable, and they're large enough, and with this knurled section you can get a pretty good hold of them. So I don't have any big complaints about these. If you like this style, by all means check him out. They're called comfort knobs, and these work really well. He does have a smaller one that you have to modify the thumb screw a little bit to get it in, and you can put the smaller one on the top or the bottom depending on how you use your saw. I just used the big one on top because that's the one I removed to change scroll saw blades. So this worked out pretty good, but it is designed only for the DeWalt style of thumb screw. It will not fit the style that typically comes with the Excalibur. So I actually wanted both, but I don't have any big complaints about this. It's a good option. Okay, so now we come to the part in the video where I want to talk about another option that I've come up with that I think is my favorite so far. I haven't used it very long, just a few nights now, but I'm going to build one for you here tonight, and you can give it a try because it's going to be super cheap to make, super easy. You can make one in just a few minutes, and it will work on the DeWalt and on the Excalibur scroll saws, and maybe some others too, but I haven't tried it out on other saws. Now, let's talk a second about something that I may have changed my mind on somewhat. I have always recommended that people that go out and buy a scroll saw to look for a scroll saw that is a toolless blade changing saw. In other words, you don't need to get out a tool like a wrench or something to actually loosen the blade from the clamp. And to me, that's always been a big advantage because any extra time while you're scrolling is a problem if it's a large project. So I'm kind of back up from that tonight, because what I'm going to make is a tool that you are going to use to remove the thumb screw from the blade. But this tool, I think, is easy enough to use and quick enough that it kind of negates the fact that you turn your machine into a tooled blade removing saw. Okay, let's take a look at the tool and then I'll show you how to make it. Okay, here it is. Here's the tool. Now, as you can see, it's a piece of dowel rod. In this case, it's a 1 1/4 inch dowel rod, but you can select a little bigger, a little smaller, whatever's comfortable for your hand. I have rounded it over on the back end to make it comfortable to hold on to. The fact that it's nice and big means your fingers aren't getting in a cramped position to loosen the blade. On this end of it, you'll see I've got a circular piece of Baltic birch plywood, and ever so simply, I just cut the shape of the thumb screw in the end of it. And you can see from this case, this is the Excalibur type thumb screw. It fits in there fine. And this is the DeWalt shaped thumb screw, and it also fits in there. So let's take a look over at the saw and I'll show you how this works. Okay, we're over here at the scroll saw now. I just want to show you how this tool works. So I'm going to zoom in here real close and just give you a quick demonstration. Not that you need much of a demonstration, but it's pretty obvious how it works. But let's take a look anyway. Okay, first let's talk about storage and what my plans are that I haven't completed yet. I'm going to get some of those very strong magnets, and I'm going to embed them into the shaft of this wood, and that way I'll be able to either store them right underneath the table or back here on the table out of my way, or just wherever I want to. As long as it's metal, we'll be able to keep it real handy. Right now, I literally just keep it on this table right here beside me. But this is how simple and how handy this is. Now again, I understand this is turning a toolless machine into a tooled machine. But if you have problems with your hands, like a lot of us do, with arthritis or any other problems, this may be worth the trade-off. And to be honest with you, I don't think there is much of a trade-off as long as you keep this right next to you all the time. But it's just as simple as this. You just release the tension from your blade, you place the tool, you get a nice, firm hold here without hurting your hand at all, and you just turn. And it's just that simple. You've released the blade from your upper clamp. Now when you get ready to put it back on, you just push your blade up in there, take your tool, tighten it back up, set your tool down, and you're ready to go again. So again, I know we've talked about changing it over to a different style, but for me personally right now, I'm enjoying this tool a lot. I think it's handy enough that it's not causing me a burden, and yet it makes the pain in my hand on a real long scroll saw project much reduced. So, okay, let's take just a quick look at what it takes to build this. I don't think it's anything that you couldn't figure out by yourself, but we'll take a look anyway. Okay, let's talk about what we're going to need to build this tool. On my website, you're going to find the plans for this, and I think we'll call it blade removal tool. So if you're doing a search in my catalog, search for blade removal tool. You'll find a very simple pattern, and I'll put extras in here so you can make more than one. But basically, we're going to cut out this pattern, with the hole in it, and we're going to mount that to a piece of dowel rod. And what I did is I purchased a 1 1/4 inch diameter oak dowel rod, and from that I cut a 4 1/4 inch length of that dowel. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to apply the pattern to this Baltic birch plywood, and I highly recommend that you use this Baltic birch plywood for the business end of this tool. Hardwoods are going to break on you. You're just almost certain to fail. So get yourself, in this case I'm using 1/2 inch thick, but it could just as easily be 3/4 of an inch thick, and I haven't tried, but maybe even 1/4 of an inch would be enough to to hold the blade clamp. So I'm going to put a little piece of my blue masking tape on this plywood, and I always do this just to make it easier to cut. And if you watch my videos, you know that I always use this blue painter's tape underneath the pattern. And we will quickly cut out one of these pieces of the tool. I'll leave that to hold on to. I usually do this over at my gluing board, but in this case I'll just hold it with my fingers. And we're going to tack this down to my blue painter's tape using some spray adhesive. And now what I'll do is, I won't do this on camera, but I'll run over to the drill press and I'll drill 2 entry holes, one inside the hole and one just on the outside. Then I'll meet you back over at the scroll saw. I've got my entry holes drilled in this pattern, and I'm just going to quickly cut this out. And you don't have to be super deep because you can sand it down and make it a little easier to hold on to once you get it cut out. So with that, I'm going to cut this one out, and while I'm doing it, I'm going to use my tool to loosen the thumb screw. So just release the tension, turn that, then we can thread our first entry hole and make our first cut. Okay, there's the interior cut out. Let's go ahead and release the blade and do the exterior, and then we'll start putting the tool together. And while you're doing this, you get a little practice cutting circles. Okay, we got that piece cut out. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take this over to the sander and actually sand this thing a little smoother and make it a little more round, because I did a really lousy job cutting it out. So we'll go over there, get the tape off of it, turn the disc sander on, and we'll just smooth it out a little bit. Close enough. Let's go back over to the workbench and we'll put this together. Before I do that, let's work on the handle just a second, because I usually take this piece of dowel rod that I cut off, and over here in my disc sander I actually round off the end of the tool just to make it easier to hold on to. Just spin it around a few times until you put a little bit of a bevel on it, and then we'll sand it over to the workbench. I've got both pieces of our tool over here at the workbench, and I also have some super glue and some super glue activator, because I want this to be a very strong bond. And wood glue will probably work, but you're going to have to wait quite a while for it to dry, and it'll probably hold it. So if that's all you have, go ahead and feel free to use that. I'm going to use this because it's almost instant. Now what I do is I take the piece that we just cut, and on the inner rim of this I put some of this super glue. And I'm just putting it on the inner because I don't want it to squeeze out any more than we have to. And then I take my activator and spray, of course, the end that we didn't bevel. And now just kind of carefully line it up. Doesn't have to be perfectly centered. Put it on there, and again, you're not going to have much time for it to be able to move it. Just apply a little pressure and it will glue here or dry here in just seconds, and we'll be ready to use it. So there is our finished tool that will fit both the Excalibur and the DeWalt thumb screws. You have plenty of room here on this grip to get a nice hold, and give it a try, see what you think. It is the tool of choice for me right now. I may change my mind, but it's what I want to use right at the moment. Just one last thought on using this tool and taking an expensive scroll saw that one of its main features is the fact that it's toolless for changing blades. That's fine. That's what I've looked for my whole life in buying scroll saws. I've had tooled and toolless blade change scroll saws, and I much prefer the toolless. But in this case, because I am getting older and I do suffer from a little bit of arthritis in my hand, I find this a valuable extra addition to the saw. So I'm by no means saying this should be what you use if you don't need it. I mean, if turning that thumb screw doesn't cause you any pain or discomfort, then by all means use it. It's going to be a little bit quicker, but this tool works really good if you do have any pain. And I get email from you guys all the time telling me that those thumb screws are too small. How can I fix it? I've seen your knobs, can you show me where to get the pattern? So I know there's people out there with a need, and this might fill one of those needs. So I hope this helps you. I'm Steve Good. Thanks for being here with me at the Scroll Saw Workshop, and we'll see you next time.